you to stay till I'm in the grave, till I rot away, dead and buried, till I'm in the casket you carry. And if you go, I'm going too, 'cause it was always you. And if I'm turning blue, please don't
you are listening there
nothing left
to the performer Irene Diaz.
without my baby.
But the important part here for today's conversation is she's playing it on a guitar that has parts made from the product produced by Symmetry Wood called Pyrus. And so welcome to the show, Gabe Tavas and Tim Keating, who are going to be here to tell us all about this. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
And I got to say, I was super blown away when I got to meet the two of you and the product that you produce. And I just thought it was a really great way to start it here to kind of show proof of concept before we even get into it, because I really think people are going to be pretty amazed by what you're doing and how it's created, too.
Yeah, we're excited to share, the story behind this material and, the story behind our company and the mission driving us.
Yeah. And so this particular opportunity with Irene Diaz, how did this come across where you were using that she was chosen to play the instrument?
Irene actually came up to us at a table that we had set up in the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, where we had successfully been brought in to their accelerator as a cohort member, I guess initially in 23. And this was a power day, which they have for the companies that have graduated their accelerator program. And it was open to, a bunch of people. And we had a guitar sitting there next to the table to tell people, hey, we're working on fretboards. And Irene came up to the table and asked us about that and said, hey, when it's ready, let me know. I'm a singer-songwriter here in LA.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
And so let's get right to it here. Let's describe. So this product that you've done, it's the end product is something that is usable in the same way that wood would be, but it's not anywhere ever been a tree before.
That's right. So, we have been increasingly realizing that what we're making is really in its own material category.
Sure.
To get more into that, I like to say this stuff has like the chemistry close to wood, but strength more like stone and adaptability kind of like plastic. So what I mean by that is, getting a tad technical, what this material...
Please get nerdy. Go get there. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. So, anyone who knows anything about wood knows that cellulose is the key chemical within that's what helps make wood what it is. It's the most abundant organic polymer on the planet, actually, common in pretty much all plants.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we are increasingly realizing that some plants, some trees are becoming harder and harder to source, becoming endangered. So the idea of trying to get the cellulose from those trees is starting to sound more and more unappealing and uneconomical, frankly, in certain respects.
Sure.
So we realized, well, what if we got that cellulose from bacteria instead?
Right.
What we're doing is we're working with this bacterial cellulose. It is a little different from the cellulose you get in plants, but still the same essential chemicals. So we can take that bacterial cellulose as a waste byproduct from the food sector, specifically the kombucha industry, and transform it into this material that has compressive strength rivaling high-grade marble. So that's why I bring up the strength of stone aspect of this.
Yeah, and I think too, when I was learning about it, first of all, I'm a huge supporter in and of the fact that I drink at least one kombucha a day, so I'm helping. But to hear that it was basically it ends up being, to talk about it a certain way, the excrement of the bacteria that are producing the kombucha fermentation.
Mhm.
And so, and that the only other byproduct of this, from what I understood, was water. Like, you just have to somehow dehydrate this stuff and then it's usable, to oversimplify it.
Essentially, well,
Yeah.
Tim, you want to get into that actually?
Well, when it comes to the kombucha process, they start out with tea leaves in general, and
Mm-hmm.
and then ferment those, and it just so happens that for a very long time, the mother, if you will, of kombucha
Right.
producing
Mm-hmm.
this, what they tend to call the SCOBY, uh, that they pass, sell. You can buy them on Amazon.
Sure.
Uh, naturally contains the bacteria that are part of a class of cellulose producing bacteria,
Wow.
and so they consume the sugar and some of the body of the tea leaves,
Mm-hmm.
and convert that. And one of the things that they produce is fibers of cellulose that join together and float at the top of your kombucha vessel, and they assume they're doing that to create a protective layer from UV radiation.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is really, really interesting. So there's a biomimicry aspect to it as well.
Wow.
So it's not like we've engineered this bacteria or anything. It
No, right.
exists
I
in the
once thought
world.
that was important to kind of
Yeah,
talk about, and even
yeah,
just I heard Gabe, I believe it was you, on a different podcast, talk about how there's an entire effort to say, can I somehow take the waste of this out, like this process, and turn it into the raw materials of this, which is exactly what this one is you're producing something and I can now use what you have as a byproduct of that. We're like, one man's garbage is another man's treasure, in other words. But in this ecosystem of trying to create, like, okay, this is now somewhat constantly making zero waste, because even what you're putting off, I'm able to take in and create something else very cool. And now your only waste product, if I understand it right, probably not only, but the major one is just water. Like, it's just that you bring that out of this, and that becomes, now you got what you need to use, and your only waste product is what you can just put back into the environment, and it's clean.
yeah.
So
And
certainly,
right.
there are, I think there's a lot of benefit, frankly, to working with a totally organic feedstock material, if you
Sure.
will. Unlike what you see with the plastics industry, where they love to say you can like recycle
Sure.
XYZ plastic and still get a usable product after that life cycle. We actually can do that at some level, and any waste that remains can act as a source of nutrients for our ecosystems. So there's nothing toxic to what we're doing, no harsh chemicals,
Right.
nothing that would hurt human health or planetary health, and
Sure.
we intend to stay that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we scale up, Tim and I are going to be very much staying true to those principles.
Yeah. I was going to bring up the site. I'm sure there's places we can go to that will be good examples for you to kind of have us point to. So I was going to go here to, it's symmetrywood.com. And then you can kind of get to, like, tap into some of this. Obviously, we're touching on some of these things here. And here's the how we do it. Very cool stuff here that you can check out. Any particular portion of the site you want me to go to in particular?
If you go to the gallery webpage,
Yep. Got it.
if
Yeah.
we stay on this part right here,
Yeah.
I want to actually give a shout out to Tim for having created that prototype you see in the photo there.
Sure.
This is a short, the photo gets cut off, but you see part of this flooring wear layer prototype that
Mm-hmm.
Tim worked on quite carefully. Basically, you can think of it as like a thin piece of our material glued onto regular plywood with a tongue and groove design.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found was that the material ended up shining through like crazy. It gets like to a mirror-like finish, and it still has this marbling in it that is totally natural to that material. There's nothing we did to introduce that pattern. That was
Mm-hmm.
just the result of how the fibers behave, a totally natural process, if you will.
That's very cool.
Yeah, there's a particular part of our process that is, is unique to what we're doing, or what we need to do in order to continue the rest of the process. We do kind of take this waste. I'll use the term SCOBY as well.
Sure.
It's basically like,
Yeah, let me use the bad ones. But
gloppy sheets of I don't want to offend anyone,
no,
but
you're fine.
when it comes in the buckets, it's like a bucket of snot, really.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's
so we
exactly
do,
that's cool because that's what I pictured it as. So it's
yeah,
you're just
yeah,
validating.
yeah. I think in one of the videos on the website now, maybe the Innovation Nation one, or there, Gabe does kind of show a little small container of what the material looks like just after we grind it.
Mm-hmm.
And the grinding is something of a homogenization. We don't take it all the way though, and that's why we want to maintain this beautiful modeling that you see there
Sure.
in that piece, because
I found
it really is gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, I found another picture that I can just kind of share here.
Yeah.
That was this is from a different site, so I just thought I'd show that because you're right. It's just a gorgeous. It almost has grain to it, like the way wood would.
Yeah, this piece was an early piece that we had a choice. We could have taken it all the way down and tried to make a little fingerboard, like a mandolin fingerboard or something
Sure,
out
right,
of it.
right,
But
right.
we really loved it. We left some live edge on it, and it was just gorgeous. It looked very much like a piece of live edge. I'm going to say, I can't think of a wood that dark, but if you were to take some wangi or something and have a burl, like a wangi burl, and then sand it to a point where you still have live, wane on it. That's kind of what it looked like. And so, yeah, we can do a whole lot of different things with this.
Sure. And this is where it turned into kind of like that fretboard process.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very
right.
cool.
Yeah. So that was a photo taken by the luthier and his colleague as that luthier was sanding it down. So, you could see what the process was like.
Sure.
The luthier did note the hardness as he was doing that. He found he did have to put a bit more force into it than he would with
a little more elbow grease.
Yeah, with like tree direct wood. So that kind of, that's another testament to the strength of this stuff when we like really, densify it the way we do.
Sure. And did they say, I'm going to bet that the first couple people who worked with it didn't believe it was going to work well. But I'm guessing over time they got convinced, like, wait, this stuff really is good.
You're absolutely right. The only difference, if you do work with wood, is there's no grain. So, which we find can be of benefit because
sure, because you're always talking about go with the grain or against the grain or all these different things
that
you have to worry about, and then now you wouldn't have to worry about that. I also I don't work with wood.
Absolutely.
But I used to build some sets in the theater, and I remembered if you put it through the saw the wrong way, it was going to bite back at you and all this stuff. Like I could see where that could be a benefit to not have that be a factor, especially for a lesser experienced person too.
So in that regard, our material is more akin to, say, a ceramic.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe even going beyond, ceramics or these other conventional materials, our stuff is starting to really look like it's isotropic. So to your point, having fairly equal strength in all orientations.
Sure.
And, that's because we're dealing with these nanofibers. These things are, the fibers from the bacteria are like so darn small that once you like consolidate them as much as we do, it's like, incredibly interwoven at that point.
Right.
So
that must be where the logo must stem from somewhere around there too. Is that correct? The symmetry of all that? Yeah.
Well, actually, I mean, the logo was something that I had, kind of sketched out in a early journal of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I was running with the name Symmetry,
Mm-hmm.
not because there's, well, tree in the name,
Right.
but
Right.
but
Perfect.
because of really the mission
Nailed
of
it.
what this company, of what's driving this company. We are here to create materials that can promote harmony between humanity and nature. And so we want symmetry between,
Sure.
our society, our human society, and the rest of the natural world. We are part of this natural world, and we need to start acting like
Yeah.
responsible, uh, you know, members of it. Really.
Yeah. There's the logo and the name. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And then where did Pyrus come from? Is that scientific? Is that something that came from just like the imagination?
Yeah. So with Pyrus, actually, that one has a bit more of a technical origin, at least
Cool.
in
I
my
kind of
mind.
got that sense, which is cool.
Yeah. So, the way I was making the material in the early days, it was rather similar to this other material that I had read about and seen in a documentary called Pycrete.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds complicated, but all that Pycrete is, if you Google it and look on Wikipedia, it's basically sawdust frozen in water. And the resulting material ends up having like crazy like resistance to like bullets. Like it's very
Wow.
bullet resistant. Um, so yeah, that was I was looking at the structure of the material back then and
Mm-hmm.
making a bit of an analogy to that sawdust ice combo,
Sure.
and I just used the term Pyrus because it sounded similar
Sure.
to Pycrete. I was doing a bit of a play of words there.
Got it.
So that was the origin. That might be different than what people assume. If anyone's familiar with scientific naming, Tim and I have talked about this before, but yeah, that was how I came up with it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess I wanted to spend a moment here too, and it also I not only is it always cool to hear someone's backstory, but I also wanted to give this credibility. You've spent time. This is what you studied. Like this was areas of expertise for you before this. Like so, it's not like some person who happens to just get accidentally walk into a good idea. Like this is something you were chasing for a while.
Yeah, I mean, this is true for both me and Tim in the
Right.
sense that we both have been chasing this, well, wood sector for a prolonged period of time. Obviously, Tim more so, and he can talk to that
Sure.
later on. But for me now, it's been about 8 years of, very, I should say, rather independent tinkering and R&D.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say independent, I mean like I was doing a lot of this work without having like, the support of
Right.
fancy laboratories or even like professors who could like guide me to do certain steps. I was more or less like, looking at existing work online, looking at uh, other works that had been done in the biomaterial space and seeing how I could, adapt that prior art, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
in order to create this new wood-like material. So, yeah, I approached it as a very curious designer, and along the way, I picked up a lot of engineering and now business as well. So, I guess you could say I've become much more well-rounded because of symmetry.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Tim, let's hear about your background.
Yeah. Well, in terms of how I got here, I started a nonprofit back in 1989 called Rainforest Relief,
Mm.
and I already was, an environmental activist prior to that, to a smaller degree, but decided to make that my focus of my
Sure.
career, and right off the bat, the first thing that presented itself to us was Atlantic City, and this was I went to school in southern New Jersey. Atlantic City had gone out to bid for tropical hardwoods to
Mm.
replace some of their boardwalk, and so that was my first experience in starting to do some outreach and see if I couldn't stop that from happening.
Right.
And so it became the real main focus of Rainforest Relief for the 26 years that I ran the organization. And we moved it into New York City eventually, the organization, and went after New York City. It turned out to be the single largest end user of tropical hardwoods in North America.
Wow.
And it took me 13 years to finally get New York City Parks Department to announce that they were ending the use of tropical hardwoods for the 12 and a half miles of boardwalks and all the tens of thousands of park benches in the city. So I ended up doing some consulting and whatnot, and then I saw an article about Gabe and Pyrus and his win of the James Dyson Award in design for this material. And so I looked him up on LinkedIn and sent him a message. And that was, I think, 2021 or early 22. And that was it. This was to see someone else interested in an alternative to tropical hardwoods, and one that is absolutely unique. It's not plastic. It's not
Sure.
other woods that are questionable as well. But so Gabe accepted me onto the Symmetry Wood team.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And then you come across this material. You're starting to turn it into a product. And you had a lot of paths you could have taken. Obviously, you were just talking about building materials. You could have done furniture. You decided to go down the path predominantly of music instrument construction. Where did that kind of come from? Where was the decision around that made?
Well, that credit goes to Tim, given his experience with tropical hardwood replacements. I tasked him essentially with figuring out a go-to-market strategy for Symmetry that would really maximize our positive environmental impact. So, he can speak more to the reasoning there. We've learned a lot since those early days of the inception. But that really did begin with him brainstorming on the possible applications.
Yeah. I saw what they had already produced, and this was at their university in Chicago. And Gabe had, a team of other students with him, and they were making small pieces basically as discs because they were using baking pans in the oven to dry it out. And so given that was the size they were able to produce at that time, in this thinking about what might be the first market where we could enter, I was looking for something that was relatively small in size, something that was relatively valuable, and something that if we were able to gain any traction in the market for that particular thing, would actually displace a significant amount of tropical hardwoods. So guitar fretboards is what initially came up for me. And, as it turns out, about 2/3 of fretboards produced and put on guitars by the industry here in the US are either ebony or one of the rosewoods. And both of these are now listed on Appendix 2 of CITES. Wow. And when you think about the numbers, we're probably talking about a million fretboards a year. So this is a significant amount of wood. But more importantly, I think with ebony too, and we learned a lot as we were diving into this, the amount of cutting that goes on in the woods to create ebony fretboards, given that, and this was actually Bob Taylor who first put this out to the world because they were doing an investigation at the same time. For every single ebony log, if you will, and these are pretty small at that point
Mm-hmm.
by the time they're, getting to a factory. Um, they cut 10 trees to get one tree that's acceptable. And this was happening out in the woods, unbeknownst, believe it or not, to the importers, that the woodcutters, because they were getting paid only for the pure black ebony,
Mm-hmm.
that they were choosing only the trees that ended up having pure black wood, and the only way they knew that was to cut the tree down and look at the
Woof.
butt end.
Ugh.
And if it had some white streaks in it, they would leave that on the ground and move on.
Mm.
So nine out of 10 trees, ebony trees cut in places like Cameroon and whatnot, were being left on the ground.
That's
So, it's this kind of thing that you see in the tropical hardwood market. And I can go on and on about the waste in, say, cutting ipe logs in the Amazon or whatever. But it's phenomenal how much destruction happens to access these materials. And this is, I think, one of the things that I bring to this organization is this awareness of just how horrible logging for tropical hardwoods is.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty amazing so where we all met was the Martin Guitar Sustainability Summit.
Yeah.
And in addition to hearing from you all, there was a lot of other very cool organizations, very powerful stories going on. It was pretty, it was just as heart-wrenching to see what was going on with these trees as it was when you watch like documentaries about, people who are killing dolphins and stuff like that. Like, it's just like a complete disregard for life. And it's like, how did that person get to that point? And it's just scary. But like, just in general, like, the other thing that was amazing to me was so there are guitars made from wood that's from a certified, forest that's regenerating, so don't worry about it. But first of all, it was like so expensive because of that. But then secondly, you're still cutting down trees. So like, why not do it in a way, at least on a larger scale, that's not really taking that step? Like, even if you are going to do it sustainably, it's still difficult and expensive to do. This would be a much more effective, economical way to now also let some trees, do their job and put oxygen in the environment.
Yeah, there's a couple stats that I kind of want to pop off on the subject. Sure. Actually, Tim has already illustrated pretty well how wasteful the whole logging process is in these rainforests. But I want to really zoom out here for a moment.
Do it.
Everyone listening. Over a third of Earth's tree species are at risk of extinction right now. Those endangered trees, the number of those species of endangered trees outweighs the total amount of endangered mammals, endangered reptiles, fish, these other popular groups combined.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually a real crisis we're having.
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
a biodiversity crisis that will come back to really bite us in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm afraid, frankly, the conventional tree plantations and other schemes that are being whipped up to address this are woefully inadequate, frankly, because they don't prioritize the species richness that we need to have healthy ecosystems.
Right.
Secondly, let's be real here, even for the certified woods, and I will again applaud some companies like Martin for taking the step to certify most of their woods. They're being a leader in that regard, but let's be real here. Most of even the tonewwood trade is non-certified. There's no really easy way to trace those woods. And frankly, much of the Amazon and the logging roads and scenes that are playing out there are like the Wild West.
Sure.
And
yep.
I can certainly name off other people who have seen that firsthand and can speak much more strongly to that. But the fact is, it's so hard to regulate this in a significantly large way. And so we really need to talk about these, the plan going forward. What are the alternative materials we're going to use? How are we going to get the market to finally shift away from stubbornness to openness, to creativity? There's no reason we cannot have great guitars and other musical instruments that don't hurt the planet,
Yeah,
right? And
right.
hurt us in the
Yeah,
long
yeah.
term.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I
I,
think too, like it's like one of these things where like there's this expression that we use. It's like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. But let's not forget it took 20 years to get to that point. So like if we suddenly wake up and realize that, oh shit, we probably shouldn't have cut down that many trees, good luck, because it's now too, you can't catch back up again. So like let's just leave them be, or just figure out a way to create some balance here, because we're way out of balance. And I think
yeah,
that's the thing that people don't have the zoom out like perspective on, to get that grounding to say we got to do something different.
yeah, and one of the insidious aspects of it is that there are a lot of us who recognize we've cut down too many old trees in the world, but the timber industry in general has done a really good job of diseducating people about
Yes.
the fact that, oh well, but this, when it started, my dad was in the paper industry when I was
Mm.
growing up, and so we would get this wave of advertising material coming into the
Sure.
house from companies like
Propaganda.
Warehouse or Georgia Pacific, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
And we grew up. I mean, it was almost a mantra. I think it was Georgia Pacific said, "Oh, we plant 6 trees for every one we cut down." And people got this sense that when it comes to wood cutting,
Mm.
it's all okay,
Yeah, right.
because the companies are doing good stuff now.
Mm.
Um, this is I think where people are a lot of people in the world
Sure.
are missing the reality of the horror
Yeah.
that has been going
So
on.
I guess to kind of bring us to a close here, what can people do? So obviously they can get to know more about your product and they can support it in some ways. So if you want to share that, but also what else can people do? Probably more in the music industry side of things. Like what can people do to become a little bit more informed as a consumer, and ways that if they are a musician to look for when they're going to go buy a guitar or some other piece of instrumentation, or what have you.
Yeah.
Right. So, there are a couple ways I could speak in regards to symmetry directly. But to keep it focused on the music side of things,
Mm-hmm.
if anyone it could help us get in touch with some of these, more like popular musicians who could try out
Sure.
our classical nylon string guitar,
Yep.
or hopefully future guitars that we'll have produced, that would be huge actually, because you get the right number of influential musicians using Pyrus,
Mm-hmm.
and that can help build credibility and build momentum around this more environmentally friendly material.
Sure. Sure.
So that's one way we would really appreciate and insist.
Definitely. Well, I mean, there's musicians who listen to this show. There you go. We can maybe ask them to do that, and then also, like you said, other
Mhm.
people who might be able to pass the word along. Maybe even venues that could have that as their backline instruments. Like, why not go with that, so that when somebody needs a guitar, there it would be. So yeah, that's definitely some key areas where they can do. Is there a way to kind of like help support you all directly? Like if somebody's just curious to figure out a way to kind of, are they able to purchase something from you, or to kind of like, is there some way that they can, do something to help support your efforts, or just raise awareness with the politicians? I don't know. Like, is there something like that?
I will say, certainly on you asked on the politician side of
Yeah.
things, that is something that we would also appreciate some help on over the long run, because Symmetry up till now has been largely funded by government award funding.
Got it.
That has allowed us to prove out key aspects of our technology on a remarkably lean budget. You'd be amazed if you all could actually see what Tim and I have built, and what we've done with the
Mhm.
little amount of money we've had. You'd be amazed.
Sure.
But frankly, to really scale up and actually have material that's sellable to you all and to these bigger companies, we do need to have larger and steadier amounts of funding.
Yeah.
One of the things
Right.
that slowed us down, even in like the last 6 months, was like the freezing of this key program called the Small Business Innovation Research Program. It's run by the federal government, and it gives critical funding to a lot of small businesses like ours that are doing innovative work. Long story short, a couple senators could not come to an agreement in a timely manner, and that caused the whole program to freeze
Oof.
and leave many of those companies in limbo and
Mm.
slowed them down, frankly. So
Mhm.
in our case, in Symmetry's case, we got slowed down in our scale up efforts.
Sure, of
It's
course.
going to take that much longer for us to give material to
Hmm.
interested people.
Sure.
So we need to just be, I think, overall more outspoken about supporting that kind of funding
Totally.
in the public sphere,
Yeah.
because frankly, in the private sphere, it's dicey.
Hmm.
There can be real misalignment with venture capitalists
Yeah, I can
and
imagine.
other groups that
Hmm.
have just these financial structures that don't make sense for where a company like Symmetry's at.
Sure.
This is a key thing Tim and I have talked about many times with
Hmm.
plenty of people. We're not trying to like do some quick exit out of this arena.
No,
Uh,
certainly not.
Definitely not. This is a
Hmm.
long haul thing.
Hmm.
I hope I keep doing this to the point where I have gray hairs like Tim.
And me, I got them too.
Uh,
Yeah.
so that doesn't align with a VC's timeline typically.
No, I got you. Yeah,
And
no, I got you.
so that makes the importance of public funding and grants and similar initiatives like very high for a group like us.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so any effort to advocate for those programs is hugely appreciated.
Sure.
I would add as well, at this point, I think the easiest thing for folks to do to try to, to get involved with us is send us an email, introduce yourself, and let's start a conversation. We are at the point still where we'll, obviously answer every email and are happy to talk to people one on one. We do expect to have a crowdfunding page up within the next few months. Probably going to be putting up rings first on that site as an incentive to have folks support us and our prototyping, and then from a I would say from an activist perspective, and bear in mind, I've locked down to many buildings and hung banners off of tall buildings and whatnot. But
Love it.
At this point, if you're buying any product, even if it's a guitar that you expect to have in the family for the next 3 generations,
Hmm.
if it's new, the tropical hardwoods are problematic in
Hmm.
that guitar. So, like, do anything you can to avoid purchasing new tropical hardwoods,
Sure.
especially endangered ones like ebony and rosewood.
Hmm.
So, uh, the guitar that was being played in the fade in of the show, we got secondhand on Reverb, and there's just a plethora of available machines on that site.
Sure.
If you want some traditional woods
Hmm.
in your guitar, look for a secondhand
Yeah,
guitar. That's
got it.
that's it's just really you are sending a message with your dollars.
Yep.
It's either a sustainable message or it's a message to go destroy something,
Hmm.
and there's no way around that. That's what the economy is at this point. And supply and demand. People buy more of the stuff, they're going to make more. As what's his name was prone to say on the Doritos commercial. So I think they're really at this point, we have to avoid these materials if you're
Hmm.
getting them new all out. That's
Yeah.
it.
Absolutely. Well, my hope is that next year will be the 5th annual No Planet B Jamboree, and I hope we can have Symmetry Wood and both of you there, and then we can just hand that guitar off to whoever's on the stage and say,
Yes.
"You're going to play your set with this," and then and not only they can play it, but then everybody can hear it, and that's my little wish for a year from now.
Well, a
Um,
year from now, we can outfit the whole band with.
That's
with
true, yeah.
guitars.
And then also the other wish is that you're well funded and off to the races regarding research and development. So, Gabe, Tim, thank you so much for all you do. This is such a wonderful opportunity for people. Like, I loved learning about it, and I don't even play an instrument. So I got to think other people who are genuine musicians are going to love this.
Awesome.
And so thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Philip. That was great.